Today's shout out is for Zuldinga. Millicent, Restless Revenant versus Prosper, Grima, and Child of Alara. Keeping a bunch of creatures in play with Child of Alara should be interesting. We've got a half decent curve here and plenty of mana, so we will try this. A turn 1 Vampiric Tutor for the Dimir player. The Jumpstart Foundations set was supposed to come out this week, mid-December. It's now been delayed until the 22nd of January, so we're going to have to wait for those commanders all the way until then, at which point people probably won't be interested anymore, but I have in the meantime done some scouting around for some commanders that have entered Magic Online in the meantime, and whilst we don't have Wilhelt the Rock Cleaver, one of my favourite commanders from recent sets, one of my other favourite commanders from the same set, Millicent, Restless Revenant, has obviously been released, so decided to give that one a whirl here. I think they are going to release Wilhelt at some point, but not sure when that will occur. Okay, another land for us. So we go for our Surveil land, and Meticulous Archive shows us a mirror entity. Maybe I'll regret getting rid of that because it can buff our army, but yeah, I'm not particularly interested in playing the Changeling. And explore for the 5 colour player, see if he gets into another land. He does. It is a Field of the Dead, not going to help him get his commander down any quicker at least. And it's a Sol Ring for Grima, so we'll assume that that's what he tutored for. 4 cards in hand and hopefully has a means of drawing into more. I'd always tend to go for a means of card draw over ramp with something like Sol Ring, especially in a Dimir deck. They didn't get into Rhystic Study or Black Market Connections, anything like that with their 3 mana, just passing the turn, and the Prosper player decides to cycle a land. Alright, Guardian of Faith, a good one to play, so yeah, we'll just go for the Arcane Signet, Sylvan Library from what is so far a Celestia player. And thanks to the Sol Ring we see Grima. Now I have a feeling that our opponent is going to scoop if we decide to blow up the Sol Ring, because they did miss a land there. So maybe Skyclave Apparition will be able to get rid of a player next turn. And Infamous Cruel Claw is a scary commander in its own right. We draw into White Orchid Phantom, so we'll have 5 mana next turn, which means we can go for the Hanged Executioner and the White Orchid Phantom, and go for blowing up Field of the Dead before it becomes a problem. But as of right now, let's go for the Apparition and get rid of the Sol Ring. Or maybe we could, maybe Sylvan Library is the better option because they're doing alright on mana. I think it plays into Child of Alara's hand at the moment, and we want everyone to be looking everywhere as opposed to just one player in us or the Child of Alara. We want to make the game last as long as we can at the moment. Crop rotation, with the forest being sacrificed, goes after any land from the library. And that is a Maze of It, so he's gone down a mana there. And Life from the Loam he now has access to, so maybe going for the White Orchid Phantom on the Field of the Dead isn't the best idea. Grima, the first commander to attack in, and goes in at the Rakdos player, and so is able or unable to be blocked and triggers for the first time. Grabs himself an Ignite the Future, which ironically exiles even more cards off the top. And they've got until the end of the next turn to play them. So get access to Demonic Tutor, Garuda, and a Counterspell. Potentially still don't have any lands though. So Demonic Tutoring for a land, we have to assume. And if they grab themselves a blue mana here, they'll still be able to hold up the Counterspell. They do shock down a Watery Grave. Tapping down the mana straight away though, for a Realm Breaker, and that is going to get them into more lands, so you can see why they went for that. Cruel Claw attacks back in at Grima and gets himself into a Chaos Warp going onto the commander, and it turns into a Storm of Saruman, so that's pretty good. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, copy it. There is a Tech Edge over here as well, which is noteworthy. So the second commander enters, Prosper Tomebound, and exiles off the top a Vandal Blast. Okay, a pet card of mine, and no excuse not to play it in a Spirit Tribal deck, Drogskull Reaver. So play an island, and I think we are going for the White Orchid Phantom still. It'll take them a few turns to replay the Field of the Dead and fish it out of the library, and they'll lose a draw if they want to get Life from the Loam as well. which might make things more difficult for them because they've got the, or they don't have the Sylvan Library anymore. Alright, so we do blow up Field of the Dead. I don't imagine we're going to keep that out of play for any length of time, but might buy us a turn or two. An island is fetched out for that, so we were fixing their colours a little bit in doing that. But the only other target would be Tech Edge, and I want to encourage that over here as well. And then the Prosper goes down a land. So Hanged Executioner, just hoping that we don't see a board wipe, hoping that this isn't board wipe tribal from the Child of Alara. And then we'll pass the turn at that, I think, and hope that we can land the Millicent next turn and start making some spirit tokens. Yeah, so casting Life from the Loam straight away after dredging that in the graveyard so far. They must have got some more lands because there's only a Skyshroud Claim that we haven't seen so far. So they've got Yavimaya in play. We know that they've got at least one more land in the Field of the Dead. So 4 cards available. A Solve the Equation, searches for an instant or sorcery. And that is a Nature's Claim he went after, which can be tapped down straight away thanks to Maze of Ith now tapping for a green. And puts Nature's Claim onto the Realm Breaker. Might as well do that this turn because he's going to have Counterspell available to him during this next turn. Until the end of the turn anyway. If he managed to get into a land here, he could always go Garuda and end up getting a board into play. Looks like he's been unlucky with these lands though. And there we go, board wipe. Toxic Deluge, 4/4, wipes out everything, and our opponent will, over here, end up with a token. Yeah, this is the problem. In the creature-based decks nowadays, you're just not going to keep creatures in play for any length of time, and I do really like this commander. I think I've played it in fact, I'm pretty sure I've played it in paper a few times, and it is really fun, but I don't think it's something that you should really build on Magic Online. Oh, okay, so whites the board and scoops, which is a total dick move. And that means that we eat the Vandal Blast onto our Arcane Signet. So all this just playing into the hand of the 5-colour player, really. Professional Facebreaker, able to get some treasure on the go. Well, we get into another rock at least, so we play Otawara as a land. That gives us 6 mana next turn. So maybe be able to go for Drogskull Reaver, probably not. Probably just going to have to flash this in as a creature, just for the sake of discounting the commander. Field of the Dead entering again, so only held them off for a few turns like we thought. And the zombie triggering for the first time. Hour of Promise, so looks like this is a 5-colour lands matter list. He did grab Life from the Loam back as well, so he's got a couple of lands and an Explore the Underdark in the bin. Triggers Field a couple more times, fixes his colours with the World Tree, and he has Beseiju in order to make instants and sorceries uncounterable. Facebreaker swings in at us, and when it hits us makes a treasure token, and then Braids are a nightmare, so may well sacrifice the treasure to that. Yeah, they sack the treasure. We're certainly not going to get rid of our Mind Stone here, so let's instead go for the Guardian of Faith. Okay, Clever Concealment. I don't think we're going to be able to get enough creatures into play. Maybe if we can get round another turn cycle, then yeah, the tokens that we might make from this are going to be relevant with that. Only have a discount for 1 on our commander now, unfortunately, and I'll take the 3 power Guardian against the 3 toughness Braids, which I'm assuming he doesn't want to give up on. That's his means of card advantage at the moment. All we're going to do is get a token here, so it's not really something our opponent should be that worried about. He is thinking about something though. Decides to allow it through and triggers our commander for the first time. Going to cast an uncounterable instant or sorcery here, 4 cards in hand. Titania's Command, exile a player's graveyard, gain 1 life for each card, and then search for 2 lands, put them in tapped. So when the lands come in, triggers the Field of the Dead again, has a Phyrexian Tower and Alchemist's Refuge. The 2/2s go into the right. Noteworthy Maze of Ith is left up now, so that might mean that there's fewer creatures that we can swing in with next turn. Although we might want to keep the Facebreaker from making any more tokens. Plays a land into field, and that is Deserted Temple. Untaps a target land. Haven't seen Gaia's Cradle yet, surprisingly. Profane Tutor has been suspended apparently, so removing a counter from that. Got a Temple of the False God in play now. And see Vampiric Tutor number 2, Brass Tunnel Grinder. Got 2 cards in hand, so when it enters it can discard any number of cards and then draw that many +1. So decides to get rid of his opposition agent. And he's got 3 in hand now. And Throes of Chaos is Cascade, that has Retrace as well, but gets a free spell out of this. Ends up with a Zorn in order to make twice as many treasure. So I still don't think he's going to want to block with anything, but I might just try and get the Guardian of Faith through anyway. Decides to sacrifice the Brass's Tunnel Grinder this time, so once again say no. Braids is going to draw some cards here. And hopefully we get into a land here, because it would be good to get down Drogskull Reaver, even if we have to wait another turn cycle for the Clever Concealment to save us from a board wipe and not really do much of anything else. Swiftfoot Boots is... yeah, we could make use of Swiftfoot Boots as well. I'm going to leave the Mind Stone untapped just in case we want to crack it for a card draw. And if we put Swiftfoot Boots onto the Millicent, they can't remove it from combat with Maze of Ith. So let's attempt the Guardian of Faith again. I don't think he wants to trade us anything at the moment, but it's not the end of the world if he does, because he's got 3 good creatures there. And I'll take Millicent into the left, hold back the Spirit Token so that we can go for Clever Concealment still. Our opponent might as well use the Maze of Ith here, unless he's holding it up for mana. Looks as though we're being allowed to let everything through here. So we'll trigger the Millicent twice, which makes it easier for the Clever Concealment. That means that the Convoke can pay for the entirety of the thing, and we can still crack the Mind Stone if we need to. Life from the Loam being cast again after being dredged, so yeah, we know of most of the things that are in here already. Just the Fetch and a Simic Guildgate being returned to hand here. Zombies coming in towards us this time, so we're taking a hit for 12, and I think I am just going to take the hit here, because I'm hoping that we'll be able to make use of Drogskull Reaver at some point, although we won't be able to get haste on it next turn, annoyingly. The fact that he's tapping out there suggests that there might be a board wipe though. Plays a land first into Field of the Dead, and that is a fetch land, so maybe not. He's just planning on holding up blockers. 3 cards in hand and a lot of mana held up, passing the turn. Profane Tutor going to see the, 5th tutor this game now. Plays himself a Sol Ring, so yeah, not sure what he's tutored for yet. I wouldn't have thought he'd tutor for that this late in the game with all those lands available to him. Florian into play, so looking at a load of damage, and then he's able to exile a card off the top and play it. Volcanic Torrent, 4 spells cast before this. It's Cascade, and then it deals X damage to each creature and planeswalker your opponent's control, where X is the number of spells you've cast this turn. We'll wait for the Cascade first before we allow that to resolve. The issue being here that we can phase everything out, but we can't, unlike with Teferi's Protection, protect our life total. They get a Talisman of Indulgence, so yeah, we're probably taking more damage from these, but we have to go for the Clever Concealment here. So I'm going to phase everything out with the Clever Concealment, we might as well. Priority being held up by Child of Alara might have something for us. He's going to play something at flash speed thanks to the Alchemist's Refuge. So is this just Child of Alara and then sacrifice it to the Phyrexian Tower? Yep, plays Child of Alara, so personally, in response to this, I would go Tech Edge onto the Phyrexian Tower, so that he obviously doesn't have any means of sacrificing it then. Although priority's been handed over to us now, so our opponent won't get the chance to do anything here unless we give him priority again with the Mind Stone. We can crack that, we're going to lose it anyway, and it will give our opponent priority again once we put that on the stack. I have said something to my opponent, but once again, people ask me why I don't like trying politic and come up with deals and stuff. I mean, people just don't do it on Magic Online. So I'll try to hand priority back over, but I dare say he's not going to do what he ought to do here. So priority being given back to him, and it's for our benefit that the Child of Alara doesn't get blown up, but it's for his benefit as well. We drew into a March of Souls, by the way. And yep, passes priority back to us, so looks as though this is just going to happen. So sacks Child of Alara to the Phyrexian Tower and puts the trigger on the stack. And now Prosh is going to do something, puts Tech Edge onto the Maze of Ith. Okay, not sure what the aim is there. So everything gets blown up. Our commander will go back to the command zone. We had a couple of non-token creatures go down, so We do end up with a couple of treasure at least, but we're nowhere near where we need to be on mana. Oh, and then of course the volcanic torrent hadn't resolved yet, so don't even end up with those tokens. Wooded Foothills cracked after that in order to end up with a zombie token. And Splendid Reclamation returns all lands from graveyard to battlefield, triggering field 3 times again. So now it's our turn. And there we see Sire of the Storm. I mean, we're just not being able to keep any of our ramp, unfortunately. There's just nothing that we're going to do here this game, I don't think. Milled to the Dredge, there is a, well, I'll try and show you when the graveyard decides that it wants to stay open, a Talaria West, an Intuition, and a Kodama's Reach as well. So they've got the Life from the Loam back, we get a trio of zombies hitting us. Plays a land into the Field of the Dead, that was a Guild Gate, followed by Sky Shroud Ranger. Can tap that to put a land into play. Ignite the Future being played with Flashback after it was put into the graveyard by an opponent, so we see Dorothy Voidwalker, Bonehorde Dracusaur, and probably Tybalt Cosmic Imposter. 1 card in the Simic player's hand, but he's going to do something else at instant speed with the use of the Alchemist's Refuge. Plays Life from the Loam to grab the Talaria West, Bonehorde Dracusaur into play, and does play the Planeswalker. Exiling the top card of each player's library, of course they get a land from us. See a Sol Ring over here, and it was a Riveter's Overlook off his own library, so gets the Sol Ring, does manage to play the land for us as well. So let's see if we can do anything on the next turn cycle either. That is a Nebelgast, so I think that's pretty much all we're doing here. I'm assuming that all these zombies are going to turn in towards the Tybalt and try and get rid of some stuff over there. The Dorothy Voidwalker can't block. Nope, instead they are heading in towards us. Not too worried about Tybalt apparently. The Bonehorde triggers for the first time, so exiling the top 2 cards. And sees a Nalfeshni and a Blood-Soaked Insight. So can have an opponent lose 5, 6, 7, 8 life, making this discounted all the way, only costing 2. Yawgmoth's Will allows him to play cards from the graveyard this turn. So finally gets down a Bajuka Bog, which I'd rather the Phyrexian Tower had been in the bin for that, but our opponent was more worried about Maze of Ith, so we finally see the back of Life from the Loam at least. Does make the land destruction better if our opponent has any left. Now Feshni played from exile straight away, and they've got 3 mana held up at the moment. Not entirely sure what the Yawgmoth's Will was for. Maybe he was trying to get into a land. Alright, Chaos Warp onto Maze of Ith. So Maze of Ith came back out from the graveyard anyway, still not worried about this sack outlet. Maybe he knows something we don't. Triggers Field of the Dead because he gets into another land, not sure what land it was though. Exile the top card of each player's library with Tybalt up to 9 loyalty after not being hit by our opponent. See a Guild Gate, Coalition Relic, and gets another land off us, so we'll see if this player swings in at us as well. Shadow goes into the left and the dragon does not swing him. Doubt the Nebelgast is going to do anything here, but we'll just tap down the Sky Shroud Ranger. Maybe they want to hold on to a land for some kind of trick, but we'll force them to use it here if they've got one. They do not activate it in response. So see what we get into on our turn 10. An Ancient Tomb is 2, 4, 6, 7 mana, so we can play Drogskull Reaver and probably not survive a turn cycle, but I think that's pretty much all we can go for here. We do have to tap the Ancient Tomb down for life, so immediately go down to 7. We can block with a lifelinker at least, and if the toughness of the creature that swings in is big enough, we'll get double strike lifelink as well. Nebelgast can tap down the 6 toughness creature. This does have first strike unfortunately, so that could be an issue for us because we could always chump with that, but whatever, tap that down. All we're doing pretty much is negating one of the zombie tokens hitting us, which I suppose is negating 2 of the zombies, 1 for the block and 1 for the life gain, so then it's 2, 4 and 6 damage dealt to us, so yeah, if our opponents team up they can take us out, but I'm thinking it should be a 2 versus 1 against the Lands Matter player at the moment. Talaria West was in the hand, so able to transmute it by discarding it, puts it into exile with a void counter on it, so Dorothy Voidwalker could do something with it, probably won't though. And managed to tutor up the Maze of Ith again after the Chaos Warp tucked it back into the library. And now the zombies going in at the Planeswalker, so that buys us a turn. Even taking in the 1/1, so doesn't have any use for that apparently. They've got exactly enough on the Walker at the moment, even if they do block, so probably a good idea to just not bother blocking in case they can do something to this, which is unlikely with First Strike, but it's a good habit to get into, and I suppose it takes them down a body, so does get rid of a zombie token. So there we see Maze of Ith again, and now that can keep us from attacking him with the Drogskull Reaver and gaining some life. It can also remove any attackers from combat that we block with this, so that we can't deal damage to the blocker. But we're really just treading water as much as we can here. The Bonehorde Dracusaur is going to exile cards again. This time we see a Mind Stone and a Dragonhawk, Fate's Tempest. Dragonhawk is really good. Said it before in videos, but we're seeing a hell of a lot of really good mythic 5-mana dragons in mono red recently. Riveteer's Lookout. Prosper coming back into play again, and then plays himself a Coalition Relic that was exiled previously from the, what is it called, from the Tibalt. So gets a copy of that thanks to the Beast Demon. Makes a treasure with his commander as well. And Mind Stone, just recently exiled, will get 2 copies of that, which means it pays for itself. Instead of going for this, which would probably kill us off with 2 copies of it, he decides on Throes of Chaos, so has discarded a land for that in order to retrace it, and we'll get 2 copies of whatever he cascades into. That is a Theatre of Horrors. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card. If an opponent has lost life this turn, you can play it, so gets 2 of those, and makes a treasure. Has 1 floating mana, and is going to crack some treasure into something else, so he could go for the Dragonhawk still. Instead decides on Sword of Forge and Frontier, and has a flyer, well, a couple of flyers and a shadow creature to throw that onto. Puts it on the shadow creature that can't block anyway, so he might be holding back his flyers here. And it would be great if we could see our opponent make use of Maze of Ith so he doesn't get the triggers. Swings in to the left, the flyers go in there as well. Does need to start pressuring this player. So can he afford to do the Child of Alara thing all over again? Not sure how many times he's cast his commander now. Does tap Maze of Ith in order to untap the Voidwalker. And at the end of the turn has to sacrifice the copies of everything he made, and exiles off the top with his commander a Bolas's Citadel. Alright, so see if we can actually do anything here. Like I said, I'm not sure if my opponent can actually afford the Child of Alara at flash speed and sack it, but we're just really lasting as long as we possibly can here, or trying to. So let's play Millicent again, see if we're actually allowed to do anything. Triggers the Nebelgas, we'll just tap down the zombie token and try and keep Prosper away from us, but ultimately he can probably take us out whenever he feels like it. So let's swing in with both creatures. They replace themselves with a token anyway. If we hit, of course they can untap the Maze of Ith with the Deserted Temple, but if they untap it we can block with it, so whatever. Yep, so no life and no double strike for us. So we still hit, take him down to 19 with the Nebelgast, and that is a token that enters. So yeah, we're probably pretty much dead here soon anyway. Let's just tap down the Dorothy Voidwalker. If he wants to swing that in at us, then so be it. Wooded Foothills cracked in order to get another zombie into play, and then activating the Alchemist's Refuge at the end of the turn with 2 cards in hand. And yeah, his commander did cost 7, so only lost that once here. Kind of switched off during this game. So now it is the Child of Alara, still has a Death Touch to go up against, but he probably just lets the damage through. All the zombies going to the right against the bigger threat. Alright, so Prosper blocking the Child of Alara with his Death Toucher, which means everything gets wiped out here. Yeah, I mean he could trigger it whenever he wants with Phyrexian Tower anyway, but I'd force him to use it, personally. All the zombies went in over there, knocking him down to 12. Not sure what happened there. When it dies, destroy all non-land permanents. They can't be regenerated. Oh, is it a... I see, this switches off the death trigger. So Child of Alara actually doesn't die. It goes into exile instead, and our opponent chose to put it into the command zone. So, yeah, actually well played by the Prosper player. Played a Brainstorm Looks as though he's got another land into play. That is a blast zone, so can blow up a load of stuff if he chooses. And the Rakdos player manages to get another turn intact, so exiling the top cards a few times. We see a Nashi and a Demonic Tutor. Underneath the enchantment is a Terramorphic Expanse. He's got a Strip Mine here as well, so what does he want to get rid of with that? The Maze of Ith again. Yeah, it'd be interesting if Prosh manages to get rid of the Lands Matter player after all. Demonic Tutor he gets 2 copies of. 2 cards in hand, but is about to cherry pick 2 cards from his library. Maze of Ith stays in exile as well thanks to that Dorothy Voidwalker, so as ever, as it tends to, this card doing a lot of work for our opponent. Oh wow, and then you just quit. Typical Child of Alara, Lands Matter player, drags the game out as long as he possibly can and then quits at the first hurdle. And then our opponent goes for Insurrection, swings everything in at us. It looks like we're both going down there anyway, but our opponent didn't know that before he scooped. So there we are, we saw little snippets of what we want to do with Millicent, but against the spiky players that you tend to get on Magic Online, I don't think it's a deck that you're often going to do that well with. If you want to make it like lots of small spirits and then just fill it full of control and counter magic and stuff like that, then I suppose that's one way to go with it. That's not really the way I wanted to build it. I want to make fun and what I feel as though are interesting decks, something a little bit unique about them, use different cards in the deck instead of making the same old Azorius control build over and over again. But anyway, hopefully you all enjoyed that. I think it was a reasonably interesting game, so let me know in the comments section what you think. And a massive thank you to the patrons for their support of the channel as well. I'm tribalkai. Thank you for watching.